Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Black Mirror Season 7 Episode 2. It's called Bête Noire. I believe I'm pronouncing that kinda correctly, but by all means, pull me up in the comments if I'm not. Yeah, this episode's a little bit more lighthearted to an extent than the first episode. Definitely not as depressing. It's also just inherently got a little bit of a sillier premise by the time we get to the end. Um, but it kind of sets you up for not being in the mood for something super serious. And Black Mirror tends to do this, where it'll tend to give you a really hard hitting episode, and then it'll maybe give you something a bit lighter to kind of, just make you feel a bit better. And then it'll hit you really hard the next time. So I'm expecting a depressing episode with episode 3. But something as simple as just this episode has like sort of chapter titles for each day. So it comes up saying Monday in big, huge, bold text. But whenever it does this, it does it with like organ music playing, like really overly dramatic, just to kind of get you in the mood for kind of the silliness of it. This is one where, for most of the episode, I was genuinely not sure where it was going, just because it kind of plays it close to the chest and it kind of presents itself as a bit of a sort of paranoia mystery type story. But Black Mirror almost always, if not entirely always, ties into technology in some way. And there's a point during this where I was like, this is just magic. What's like, what are we doing here? And they do kind of tie it into technology at the end by saying quantum computers are to do with it. But it feels so far-fetched that it does just feel like magic. It doesn't really feel like most episodes where you can kind of see how technology will get to this point, or you can kind of see how this is just a spin on something that feels fairly realistic, or even something like San Junipero, which is a little bit further fetched, still feels like it's grounded compared to what this episode does by the end. Which is not to say that that's bad per se, because I think it's mostly fun. If anything, the reveal of what the actual technological science fiction part that's going on by the end is, that kind of made, that was a little underwhelming or a little uninteresting to me versus just the actual story that we're following through the episode, which is this young woman named Maria who works for like a food company, like a chocolate company, and she's in the R&D department coming up with new recipes for new chocolate bars and things like that. And we meet some of the other people in the office, like the chef and the co-workers and stuff. But the main gist of the episode is that someone she knew from school named Verity comes into one of these focus test groups for the new chocolate bars and decides to apply for a job as an assistant. And this immediately rubs Maria the wrong way, because Verity was kind of the weird loner girl in school that everyone made fun of. And if I was to critique something else as well, I would say that I also found at least one part of that very, very, very predictable. Because very early on, when she's explaining to her boyfriend who Verity is and why she's kind of weirding her out, she tells this story about how, there was a rumor that she gave a hand job to one of the teachers in the computer lab, and kind of admits that, she didn't really think it was true, but it was a rumor that gets spread around. And immediately, I think anyone who has ever watched a story of any kind before should immediately just assume that the main character, Maria, is in fact the one who started that rumor. It was just, it was like the most obvious thing they could have done in terms of a reveal to make her more guilty about what happened in that time of her life. And arguably, like, as I was watching the story unfold, and it's her getting paranoid because she thinks Verity's out to get her. But there's also this other thing that it starts tapping into, which is this Mandela effect thing, which I thought, that's an interesting thing. I don't know how that ties into technology necessarily, but I was definitely intrigued when these ideas started coming up, where they're talking about this like fast food chicken place. It's not a real place, but she thinks it was Bernie's, and then someone else in the office says, no, it was Barney's, not Bernie's. And Verity says, no, I think it was Bernie's. And it's like, she looks it up in the computer, right? Eventually they get so annoyed at each other that she looks it up and it says Barney's, right? So Maria was wrong. And it's like, okay, the Mandela effect's an interesting thing for us to explore here. But it is kind of curious, like, how does that tie into technology? Like, I was kind of, I kept coming back to that as I was watching the episode. And I think, like, I like the performance of Rose McEwen, who plays Verity, when she does kind of, like, reveal her hand a little bit. And just, because she's acting innocent, and she's kind of playing the victim, and, like, She's being the perfect kind of foil for someone who's looking like, Maria, the main character, looks like she's getting vindictive and mean as the episode goes on because she's so paranoid about Verity. But Verity's acting kind of meek and nice to everyone. But there is the moment, right? The almond milk drinking moment where she just kind of, there's an employee in the office who keeps complaining that someone's stealing her almond milk. And because she's a vegan, it's the only milk she can drink in the office. So she's pissed that everyone keeps stealing it. And it turns out that it's Verity who's mostly doing it. And Verity walks in front of Maria when no one else is there. And she like just drinks the whole thing in one big swig and drops it to the floor and has this look in her face of, yeah, I'm the boss. Like, I'm the queen bee kind of thing. Really intimidating. Like, and it's funny though. It's a funny scene. And I do like that moment. But it's right after that where we start pivoting into like this Mandela effect thing and what's really going on there. And it's simply that it's not a Mandela effect. It's not that she's misremembering things. It's that reality is straight up changing. And Verity is controlling reality. She is changing things around her so that anything that she says was always true. So even when they go to look at the video camera footage to prove who drank the milk, who drank the almond milk, it looks like Maria did. And then Maria's like, but I've got a nut allergy. And that's because that's her big smoking gun, is when Verity accuses her and says, I saw Maria do it. She's like, I've got an allergy. I can't drink almond milk, you idiot. And it's like, oh, she got her there. How can they do that? So they look at the footage. Maria drinks the almond milk. And then they're like, wait, well, we've caught you on red tape. We're really sad by this. And she's like, but I've got a nut allergy. And then the boss, who's been very friendly with her throughout the episode, he's kind of a good guy boss, and the security guard are both like, nut allergy? What's that? They don't understand what a nut allergy is. And you kind of realize at this point, and Maria quickly clocks that Verity's like holding this pendant that she keeps kind of like pressing at various times and says, oh, it's that, you're changing things. For me, this is where like the episode kind of went a little off the rails in terms of enjoying the, like, I was still kind of enjoying the character performances and like what they were doing with it, but I kind of was a little bit, I thought there was going to be something with more of a hard rule here, or more of a good explanation as to why these things were not what they seemed. Giving her the ability to just completely change reality to anything she wants, and we see, when towards the end of the episode, when Maria breaks into her house, and we see that she has photographs of her, or paintings of herself, as the Empress of the Universe, where she's got like servants and stuff like that, or there's a photograph of her with an astronaut, or sorry, as an astronaut, I should say. She's wearing the outfit, and she's with famous people in these photographs, and she's got this big mansion because she can just have whatever she wants. And obviously, I think thematically, this idea of like, regardless of having anything she wants, she still ended up coming back for revenge on these kids that bullied her, because it was something that no matter how much she had, that was always in there, that was always eating at her. So that's kind of what the episode's getting at. And maybe you could argue that social media in a way, which is brought up a little bit in this episode, because Maria sort of looks at old photographs to kind of see how things were and see if Verity was doing stuff in the background or whatever. But it doesn't feel like it's tied into the core ideas that Black Mirror tends to play with. And that's not necessarily... I think that's not a bad thing necessarily for Black Mirror to kind of maybe pivot a little and say we can have episodes that are not necessarily tied to technology or that kind of thing. But I almost felt like them trying to say it was technological based at the end with like a quantum computer and saying it's tapping into alternate realities where this is true. So we're just kind of jumping from reality to reality with this computer. Like, it feels so thin to me. And when I say it feels thin, it's not because I think it's so bad an idea and it's just like magic and it's so implausible that it just rings hollow. I don't mean that. If you gave me a story that was about a quantum computer that could tap into different realities and it was making the characters kind of like hop through realities, and that's what your premise was about, and that's what the story focused on, I don't think that's a bad idea. I think that's a very good idea. But I think at that point it has to be a story that focuses on that idea and has to explore that more thoroughly and whatnot. Having that just be the explanation that comes up at the very end of the story, when it's just been these kind of simple little things she's mostly been changing throughout, feels like it's so big and grand and like huge an idea that it kind of robs it a little bit of the personal or the more grounded side to it. It was. I'm trying to think of a comparison to make here. It's almost like you're building up to the reveal of something that's happening, and you're expecting someone's like pulling strings of some kind or hacking into something, but it turns out that they're actually in control of the entire universe. I mean, that's literally what it is, I suppose, in this case. But like, it's almost like it's almost like going after a fly with a bazooka, right? That's kind of how I feel about this twist. Is that it's too big for what the premise was up until that point, and it feels a little bit kind of hokey as a result. And it's not because I don't like the idea in general. I think you could do a great story with people who have built some sort of quantum computer, and it starts messing with reality, and maybe there's consequences to that. But so much of the episode is this paranoia of that Verity's out to make her look bad, of getting the ingredients of the chocolate bar wrong, and like, oh shit, we used a beef-based thing when it's supposed to be a seaweed-based thing, and that might get us in trouble because the boss of the company is, doesn't eat that or whatever. But I think all those elements is what the episode's really focusing on, and it's kind of like the main character getting more and more unhinged. And part of me was kind of expecting this to be about her accepting that she had done something wrong in the past, and it never really did that, actually. When they finally confront each other, and they're in the mansion that belongs to Verity, and Maria's kind of saying, okay, I've got this thing, I stole your necklace, and she's like, it's just a remote, I've got 10 of them, and it uses my fingerprint, so you can't use it, it's no good to you. And when she uses one of her other remotes, she says, hey, I'll prove how this works. And she changes the t-shirt she's wearing. She changes the location they're in. They're all of a sudden they're in the office and not in her bedroom. And she explains, hey, I did do all these things. I made myself the queen of the universe. I was served on. I've done everything. But none of it was enough. I still kept coming back to these things that I've been clinging to. And that's the part of the episode that rings true for me, is the idea that people who go through something when they're young cling to those vendettas, rightly or wrongly, depending on what the wrongdoing was. But the idea of like being obsessed and going back to that, and it getting in the way of you moving forward with your life, like I can see some good exploration there, and I think part of that is absolutely here. But basically, like, she's building up to make Maria kill herself. She already made one of the other girls in the group kill themselves. That was a reveal partway through the episode, with Maria trying to contact someone else. And she gets a little bit unhinged, like asking on the phone to the husband, like, how did she die, and like, what was going on up until then. And yeah, like, Verity just kind of admits that was her in this confrontation, and says, took me weeks to break her, it only took you 5 days, so how are you going to do it? You're not a jumper like she was. And she starts like suggesting ways that she can kill herself, and Maria basically just attacks her. And it does make sense for her to attack her, because it's like, well, yeah, if you kill her then you can put an end to all this, because otherwise she'll just keep changing reality to work for her. And she gets a hold of her remote and like says, oh, the police are here, your boyfriend called them, and they're armed, and you broke into my place with a knife. And all of a sudden Maria's holding a knife. Like, she's just changed reality to fit her story. And the end of the episode is that Maria grabs the gun of one of these policemen and shoots her in the head. Gets into a little bit of a standoff with the cops, but kind of dives and like holds the dead finger of Verity onto the button and says, hey, this works for me now. And then she uses it to make the police stand down. And then they start questioning why this feels weird, because like, why are we not, like, why are we here? Why did she shoot herself? And she's like, oh, you work for me. And they start like, get all straight up and like, yeah, yes, ma'am. And then she's like, hey, I'm the explorer, I'm the emperor of the universe, or empress of the universe, I should say. And the episode ends in this ridiculous sci-fi setting with her like with a throne behind her, and these two policemen are now in like gladiator gear and like bowing before her, and there's a crowd in front of her, and the episode ends. Now, I did see a headline, I didn't look into it, but it makes sense to me now having watched the episode, that apparently, and I didn't read the article, so I don't know how different things are, but apparently some people who have watched this episode have noticed that there's some differences. So I think that you randomly get like one or two different versions of the episode, so that some things we can argue about a detail. So if I've said something here that doesn't match up with what you saw when you watched this episode, it may actually be an intentional thing where there's two versions, just to create the confusion, because that's a big part of this episode, is that she remembers something one way and then reality is changed so it's not. That makes sense, and it sounds like exactly the sort of thing that Charlie Brooker would do. So, so if I've said anything where you're like, wait, he's misremembering that, I'm not saying I didn't, because sometimes I do, but in this case, it may actually be an alternate version. So it might require more digging to find out if the details are that in this case. But yeah, so it's a very silly ending, right? It's a very silly ending, and she kind of solves everything by now having access to this power herself. But I think that's a little unsatisfying to me, because I don't know, like, to me, the character doesn't get to, like, yeah, she gets to defeat the bad guy, in Verity, sure, right? She gets to save herself from that, but now she has this unlimited power, and that presumably will mean she's going to have a problem, right, with this, like, having too much power, how she'll go through these stages of realizing, having all this is not enough because it's not, like, real or isn't genuine, and, like, maybe she'll end up going after people that she didn't like or something like that. Whatever it may be. But the main thing for me is it doesn't really feel like the end of an arc for the main character. It doesn't feel like she, like, has realized that she did something wrong. Like, to me, the ending that would make more sense would be that after she covers up, the death of Verity, which I don't think makes her a villain for doing this. I think this was the only way she could get out of this, because she was either going to be forced to take her own life or go and spend her life in prison because she looks like she was trying to kill Verity. The only way she was going to get out of this would be to take Verity out of the picture. So once she covered that up, I would say that the ending maybe should have been her destroying the computers that are in the house, the quantum computers that can, the idea that no one should have this much power, and kind of like accepting on some level that she did do bad things to this girl and that she accepts some responsibility for that or something. I don't know, something that feels like she'd learned something by the end. Whereas here it kind of feels like she just kind of wrestled that power away from her. And I guess much like just another high school kid, she now has the power, so who cares? Like, I'm now the popular one. I now get to have whatever I want. And they kind of hint at that at one point where it sounds like she made up that rumor because she was the one kind of being picked on until she said that, and that kind of turned the attention of the more bullied popular girls onto Verity and called her names and helped spread these rumors and whatever else. So I think I think the ending's meant to be a kind of a tongue-in-cheek, like, this is wild, cut to credits and we'll have a song play. And I kind of just felt like it didn't feel like a satisfying ending to Maria as a character, either because she learns something or becomes the monster herself, which I guess is what the ending's kind of like hinting towards, but it just, I don't know, it didn't quite land with me, the ending. I think it was kind of a fun episode, honestly, and mostly entertaining to watch, and the characters were, engaging, right? I think the main character getting a little paranoid, and we can sort of recognize that she's going a bit daft. If any, like, part of me was almost hoping that it would turn out that there wasn't anything happening and that she was just going a little bit obsessive, because she is thinking about memories, and she's maybe like, because I thought maybe at one point, like, the point of the episode was going to be that she remembers things a certain way and she's kind of reinforcing these false memories by looking at photos on social media, and it's making her more paranoid, and it's all about the dangers of obsessing over the past. But it ended up not being that, and ended up more being, no, the other girl's obsessing over the past, but she is, like, got the power to change reality, and that was just maybe a little less interesting than the more down-to-earth personal side of this that might use technology a bit, but not in the ways that's this grand and over the top. And they kind of tease it a little bit. At one point, Maria's boyfriend's got like a Google Glass, or no, it's not Google, it's the Apple VR headset thing, and he's talking to her in it, and he turns like the eye see-through thing on so he can see her eyes and blah blah blah. So that was kind of hinting that reality is not what it seems, or that reality can be changed at your behest. I just don't think that there was as baiting a point to this episode as I thought there was going to be, or as that I expect from Black Mirror. So it feels like a fun enough time, and I was enjoying it well enough for the most part. But I think the ending left me feeling like it didn't have as much to say as I thought it was going to. And it would have been okay if what it had to say was more just about the people than the technology itself. Like I'd have been fine with that. I mean, I think that works for some of these episodes. If you, I'm forgetting the name of the episode, but the one from season 1 of Black Mirror where it's like you can look at the memories because they're all being recorded from your eyes, and how the people obsess over that. To me, that felt like that's what that episode was getting at, and it did it in a much more baiting way that was making its point succinctly, and it was like showing the dangers of that. It felt like this was kind of encroaching on the same area, but then the technology side of it was just going off the deep end into just basically pure magic at a certain point. And there was more to explore there that maybe they should have gotten to it a bit sooner or something. I'm not really sure, but yeah, you know what, I feel kind of positive for the most part, but I feel like my tone here and what I'm discussing is a bit more negative, and I think that's just because it never amounts to being what it could be, or there's definitely disappointing elements to it by the time I'm done with it, and I kind of left a little bit of a lackluster taste in my mouth at the end. So you know, I don't know. I will say there was one moment that I thought was really funny. When she's breaking into the house, she needs to break the glass on the door to get in, and she wraps her hand in her jacket or whatever it is, and she tries to punch through the glass, and it immediately does not work. She just hurts her hand. I thought that was really funny. It was just kind of playing on expectations. It's like, oh, someone expects to be able to punch through glass like a movie, and it doesn't work like that. So she ends up using a rock. But the moment where she tries to punch the glass with her hand wrapped up, and it doesn't work, and she just hurts herself, I did think was quite funny. So, you know, I think that's fine. And I'm sure this feels like an episode as well with a lot of Easter eggs. I suspect there's probably things in here that change in the background that aren't brought up, that are just there for people to notice. I assume that is the case because it seems perfect type of episode to do that, and I think that makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, so you know, I like the performances of the two lead characters, and I like the tension that grows, and I like kind of the playful tone to it. I really do. I just think that the result and like what the actual science fiction element are when it introduces itself is just a bit too big for what the episode actually was, and it made me just feel kind of weird about the ending. And I was just kind of like, okay, that was a choice. All right, but hey, it is what it is. Let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all the usual stuff, and of course you can support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and help keep the content coming, both here and over in the movie channel, MailFuzz Movies. Check out that. There's a sci-fi movie podcast if that is of interest. It might be, since you're watching Black Mirror reviews. Of course, you can also support via YouTube membership. That also helps. I always recommend Patreon first, but any support is greatly appreciated. So thank you very much for joining me. I do appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?